Mr. Ratna Gupta of Anantapur branch. So to introduce this today's session speaker, Sri CA KVR Subbarao garu. Sir, Mr. Ratna Gupta, over to you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Shekhar, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Chairman garu, you can plan one session on faceless assessments with G. Shekhar, sir.
Yeah, why not, sir? Next, if sir is available next week or next week itself, we will have you, sir. Because so much this thing, sir, today, we really, many of our doubts have been cleared today. Sir, Ratna Gupta, sir. Sir, Ratna Gupta, sir.
Mic unmute cheyali sir, Sardi.
Okay, okay. Okay. Sir, okay. Sir, Ratna Gupta, sir. You are unmuted, sir.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Please, sir.
Good evening. Good evening to everybody. I respected Chief Guest of the day, G. Shekhar garu, Chengal Reddy garu, Naresh Gelli garu, the chairmen of Kadapa, Anantapur, Kurnool branches. It gives me a pleasure to introduce the today's speaker, KVR Subbarao, who is a senior chartered accountant. I will read out the profile of the speaker. Sri KVR Subbarao garu did his education, primary, secondary schooling and graduation done in Guntur, completed articleship in Chennai, qualified to the profession of chartered accountancy in the year 1977, securing All India rank. He is practicing as a chartered accountant in Guntur under the name of KVR Subbarao & Co. in Guntur since 1978. He has specialized in taxation of charitable and religious trusts and societies. Other activities of other than the profession: paper presenter on various issues on taxation in various chapters of chartered accountant accountancy. Major clients: major congregation of Jesus Mary Joseph, Guntur province, congregation of the societies of the Sisters of ST NA Hyderabad, Delhi Public Schools and JH Public School of Hyderabad and various other institutions, engineering colleges and hospitals and doctors, etc. He married in 1979 and blessed with two sons, one working in the same firm and other son is a qualified chartered accountant practicing Hyderabad. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce the present day speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Ratna Gupta, sir, for having introduced the speaker, today's speaker. So now may I invite Mr. KVR Subbarao garu to just take over the session and just to enlighten us, sir. Mr. Subbarao garu, over to you, sir.
Good evening, sir. Good evening to all.
Sir,
able to hear me?
Sir, we can hear you, sir. Your video is off, sir.
Sir, I couldn't get you.
Switch on your video, sir. Yeah, the swans are coming, sir. Sir, we can hear you, sir.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, now you're.
Namaskaram to all.
Sir, namaste, sir.
Today's my speech is based on two words and its related tax obligations. The first word is charity. The second word is religion. The most unfortunate thing is neither charity nor religion are defined in the Act. We know what is charity. Charity means generally what we understood is it is dharma. Whereas no one dared to define what is religion. Whereas Supreme Court in a case of Mitchell versus Union of India stated that religion is certainly a matter of faith with individuals or communities and it is not necessarily theistic. Okay? Vigraharadhana. But before going to the subject proper, I would like to ask you one straight question, whether Hinduism is a religion or not. Because based on this, we have 115 BBC section, anonymous donations and its taxation. There is an exemption to religious institutions which can collect anonymous donations, and for those religious institutions, these are not taxable. Whereas for charitable institutions, 115 BBC, anonymous donations are taxable. So therefore, I'm putting this small question before you, whether Hinduism is a religion or not. A trickless judgment given by Nagpur Tribunal way back in 2012. That is in case of Shiv Mandir Trust. There, the institution has applied for ATG. Commissioner rightly rejected because yours is a religious institution and accordingly you are not eligible for recognition under Section 80G. Then they went to tribunal and the tribunal has given a favorable reply to the institution stating the word community means a society of people living in the same place under the same laws and regulations and who have common rights and privileges. They have also quoted the saying of the Swami Vivekananda, and they said Hinduism is only a way of life, it is not a religion. So, and this is quite a trickless judgment pronounced by Nagpur Nagpur Tribunal, that is Shiva Mandir Devasthanam Trust. What happens if Hinduism is not recognized as religion? 115 BBC. Anonymous donations are taxable at a maximum marginal rate subject to certain exemption. That is not exceeding 5% of the gross receipts or 1 lakh, whichever is greater, is exempted. Now we take the Tirumala Devasthanam or Shirdi Sai Samsthan. There every day you can see on television, there is a scrolling. Today so many pilgrims attended and the hundi collections are so and so. When the Tirumala is not recognized as a religious institution as per that particular judgment, what else comes through hundi is nothing but anonymous donations. So all these anonymous donations are subject to tax at a maximum marginal rate. Take also the Sai Samsthan, Shirdi. Whether Shirdi institution is a charitable institution or a religious institution. The latest amendments I cover as and when coming to the line. So Sai Samsthan, in 1973 and in 74, Chennai Madras High Court as well as Andhra Pradesh High Court have delivered beautiful judgments. So in Hyderabad, the Commissioner Endowments issued a notice to Sai Samsthan, the Sai Shirdi Sai Temple, that your institution come under the endowment control. Then they filed a case before the Andhra Pradesh High Court. The High Court has given almost 34 pages reply, stating the total history of Sai, narrating the entire history of Sai, and finally they said he doesn't belong to any religion or community, therefore it is only a charitable institution, therefore it doesn't come into the definition of a religious institution. Now again, the same problem. When it is a charitable institution, most of the Sai temples have hundis, including Shirdi. Crores of rupees they are collecting. Whether these are liable to be taxed in the light of this judgment. So it's a very sensible and a sensitive judgment. Anyhow, we see what happens in future. So before that, we go to the definition of charity. There is no definition given in the Act, Income Tax Act, the word charity, but only given in section 2, subsection 15, the charitable purpose. The charitable purpose also, the definition says that includes, there are earlier 4 limbs. The 4 limbs are, first is relief to the poor. Second is education. Third, medical relief. And fourth, any other object for general public utility. These are the major limbs given in that particular section. Now, 2 more are added. That is preservation of environment, preservation of monument. Once our Prime Minister Modi took the charge, he brought this yoga also into the definition of charitable purpose. Now there are 7 limbs in the charitable purpose. Now we take item by item. First comes the relief to the poor. What is the relief? Relief means constructing a house to the poor, providing him a bank balance, helping him for their children's education, etc., etc. It is not so. A relief means if any person comes with hungry, providing food at that moment is also a relief to the poor. No need to give him everything. Now comes the important part, that is education. The Act clearly says just education, it is not education to the poor. Education is equally important both to the rich as well as to the poor. Sitting in this meeting is education. Reading books is education. We have n number of examples for the definition education. But Supreme Court has interfered here. In case of Lok Shikshana Trust, a landmark judgment pronounced, and it has narrowed the definition of education. It says, the education connotes the process of training and developing knowledge, skill, mind, and character of student by normal schooling. The word normal schooling is very important here. Just conducting coaching classes for chartered accountant students, conducting classes for IAS attendees, these are not equated to education. Education is development of knowledge, skill, mind, and character of student with only the normal schooling. Now for this education, there is a controversy in the income tax itself. There is 2 sections dealing with education. One is section 1023C and other is section 11 of the Act. So section 1023C clearly says, if any institution existing solely for educational purposes and not for the purpose of profit. Here the words important is solely existing for educational purpose. Solely means exclusively and not primarily. Exclusively, the institution must exist for education. The second is not for the purpose of profit. So what is profit here? Any surplus in the income and expenditure is profit? No. If the profits are again plowed back or utilized for the objects of the institution, that is not to be treated as profit. It is only a surplus. There is also another section. Recently I have given opinion to that particular institution, not in their favor, but in favor of the government it has come. That is 1023C3AB, small 3AB. It says any university or educational institution existing solely for educational purposes and not for purposes of profit, and which is wholly or substantially funded by the government. That is important here in this section. Wholly or substantially financed by the government. What is wholly and what is substantially? Earlier it was not defined in the section. What is substantially? Therefore, later they brought a rule to BBB, fixing a percentage. What is substantial? More than 50%, the funds received from government is substantial. So, before coming to this, to Rule 2 BBB, the Karnataka High Court has decided in case of Visvesvaraya Technological University case and levied a tax. And Karnataka High Court has supported the government's view, and the case went up to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court also supported the Karnataka High Court's judgment. Now recently in Andhra Pradesh, the Exemptions Commissioner has issued notices to the technological universities, and they referred the case to me, and I have given an opinion based on which now the assessment is likely to be finalized soon. The tax may be runs in crores. So the words appears to be so simple, the subject appears to be so simple, the taxation of charitable institution. It is very easy to understand the subject, but very difficult to digest. Whenever you close the books and start working on charitable institutions work, you may get n number of doubts. Now for this education 1023C as well as 11, these two are overlapping. Therefore, section 11 subsection 7 introduced, removing this overlapping provision. Therefore, even if you come to this 12A capital B, that is the new section which is going to effect from 1st April 2021 onwards, once you register or once you are approved under section 1023C, you are not eligible to claim exemption again under section 11. Once you are registered under 12AP, you cannot claim under 1023C. Now these two sections are now totally separate. Now the mistakes what our brothers have done. Section 1023, there are two institutions are divided into two parts. One is educational institutions whose gross receipts are less than 1 crore and whose gross receipts are more than 1 crore. So institutions whose gross receipts are less than 1 crore are covered under section 1023C 3AD, and for health institutions 3AE. Now once the gross collections exceeded 1 crore, it goes to section 11.6 and the 6A, not 11, 1023C 6 as well as 6A. Now most of the institutions, educational institutions in our areas are less than 1 crore gross receipts. What return we have to file? What PAN number we have to obtain? We simply apply for a PAN, and the PAN is allotted with the 4th character with A or C something. Now if you start filing the return in online site, you get at the end that status mismatch. Once it is not, the 4th character is, the 4th character should be T. Once it is not A, it goes to AOP. AOP means taxing. So you cannot claim any exemption. Be careful about obtaining PAN. Now for this again, our brother's mistake is even for 1023C, 3AD, our people are doing tax audit, filing 3CB, 3CD. If you go through section 44 capital AB, you get every person carrying on business or profession whose gross receipts exceed certain limit shall get their accounts audited and obtain a report before a specified date. Now, whether we equate our educational institution with business, we cannot. Once it is not business, what is the need of issuing 44AB report? Not necessary. and also whether any audit report is required for 1023C, 3AB, 3AD institutions. CPC also has done a mistake for the assessment year 16-17. They have selected majority of the cases which are not filed audit reports. But if you go through provision, there are 14 provisions given for section 1023C. If you see the 6th provision, there you get the answer. Only those institutions which are recognized under subsection 5 or 6 or 6A are only to get their accounts audited. Other institutions need not to get their accounts audited and no need to file any audit report. Now we go to the other part. We come to section 10 later again. Come to section 11 part. Medical relief. Medical relief was also any school of medicine given for the relief of the patient is covered under this particular one. Now comes this any other object for general public utility, an omnibus section for general public utility, but there is a proviso added with effect from 2008 onwards. That is a dangerous proviso added to section 2 subsection 15. So what is any other general public utility, any other object for general public utility? I'll just quote one example. Andhra Pradesh Road Transport Corporation. Whether this is a charitable organization or a business entity. Supreme Court said it is a charitable organization and no need to pay any tax. With that, many transport agencies took the shelter of this particular judgment and not filing any returns, not filing any paying any taxes. Now, if you come to this proviso, the proviso says, provided that advancement of any other object for general public utility shall not be charitable purpose if it involves the carrying on of any activity in the nature of trade, commerce, or business, or any activity of rendering any service in relation to any trade, commerce, or business for assess or fees or any other consideration, irrespective of the nature of its use or retention of the income from such activity. So this provision is clearly says, in case of any other general public utility clause, if you do any business that is not to be treated as charitable activity and we have to pay tax on it. But there is an exception given in the same provision. The aggregate receipts from such activity or activities during the previous year do not exceed 20% of the total receipts. Out of the gross receipts, your business receipts are less than 20%, then still it is to be treated as charitable activity, else it is a business activity. Now again, come back to the education. Many friends ask me several times that we have a society which has 4 educational institutions under it. Each institution's gross receipts are 70 lakhs, 75 lakhs, 80 lakhs, or 60 lakhs. If you gross it up, it crosses 1 crore. If you don't cross it up, it doesn't cross 1 crore. Whether to claim exemption under 1023C 3AD or to go for 1023-6. There are judgments in favor of the institutions. But unfortunately, if you file a return of income online, you cannot claim it. There is no provision in the return of income to show separate institution-wise gross receipts. Why that software is prepared in such a fashion? Because it is not provided in the act. These are only judicial pronouns in support of the institutions. So the scheme of taxation for this charitable organizations is the creation of trust must be wholly for charitable purposes. It should be created for the benefit of it should not be created for the benefit of any particular religious community or caste. But there are exceptions we see in section 13, subsection 1. The creation of charitable should not carry out any business for profit. But institutions also can do business that is permitted under section 4 of section 11, read with section 4 capital A. The objects of the trust should be such as those which are charitable within the meaning of section 2, subsection 15. And the institution should not work for the benefit of interested persons under section 13, subsection 3. Now, for this taxation purpose, the institutions are divided into 4 categories. The first category is income from charitable institutions wholly for charitable purposes. That means the total activities are for charitable purpose only. The second category is income derived from property held under trust, in part for charitable and part for non-charitable. Whether these institutions are permitted, that we will see later. And next, institutions established or created prior to 1/4/1952. And the fourth category, institutions created on and after 1/4/1952. Why this classification given? The first one is, if any institution created on and after 1/4/1961, it should be wholly for charitable purposes. It cannot have partly for charitable and partly for non-charitable. That means the act has come into force from 1961. Therefore, any institution created after 1/4/1961 are barred. It has to work wholly for charitable activities only. The second category, that is institutions which were created prior to 1/4/61, can have the 2 segments, that is non-charitable as well as charitable. Now, why this 1/4/1952 cutoff date given? Any institution established prior to 1/4/1952 can do their activities anywhere on the globe. They can do anywhere their services. But any institution created after 1/4/1952 have to carry out their objectives only within the boundaries or territories of India. They cannot do any activity outside India. But we have an exception here, which tend to promote international welfare, in which the Indian government is interested. Take the Nepal tragedy, earthquake. Their Indian government is interested to do the activities at Nepal. Now they have permitted those institutions which are created even after 1/4/1952 for doing social charitable activities in Nepal earthquake victims. Now, to claim exemption, the section 11 speaks the conditions. Section 11 says, as per section 11 subsection 1, to claim exemption, the institution must apply not less than 85% of its income in the same year. It is not just 85, not less than 85%, the section says. Income from property held under trust, to get exemption, we have to utilize not less than 85% within the year. What is this income from property held under trust? That's very important. Income from property held under trust. Suppose you are running a school in a rented premises, an educational institution. It is collecting fees and there is some surplus. Whether you treat these gross collections as income from property held under trust, there is no property. But can we say that the income, the gross receipts are from income from property held under trust? For which we have to take the Supreme Court judgment. I don't remember the citation, but it said, any source where from income generated itself is a property. The source is the running of school. income generated by running of the school is also to be equated as income from property held under trust. The other way is, suppose you have a building, you come to an understanding with the society. The building is, I am the owner of the building. The rent, what else I get, I will transfer to your institution for carrying out charitable activities. That is not permitted. The property also must be with the institution. That is called the income from property held under trust. So not less than 85% we have to apply. Nowhere in the act it said spending. Spending is different from applying. If you earmark for a certain project, that itself is applying. And for income definition, before going for this application under section 11.1, 11.2, etc., what is income? Income is the defined originally income from property held under trust. Then what about this contributions? We receive contributions in two different forms. One is the voluntary contributions. Second is the corpus donations. What is a voluntary contribution? It is not from the property held under trust. Therefore, it is outside the definition of income earlier. But now, with the amendment of this particular section, it is deemed to be the income from property held under trust. A deeming provision is introduced in section 12. Voluntary contributions are also to be treated as income deemed to be from property held under trust. Therefore, for calculating 85%, we have to include this voluntary contributions also. The second category is corpus donations. What is this corpus donation? People used to ask me, can we pass a resolution in board's meeting and transfer certain percentage to corpus? No, because the section says if any contribution received with a specific direction, that it shall form part of corpus. Specific direction means who has to give the direction? Only the donor has to give the direction. So we cannot simply say that what else we have, that 20% should go to the corpus. It is not so. The direction always must come from the donor. But you must be careful in treating the donation as corpus. You must have some evidence, the consent letter from the donor and other evidences. Suppose you have given to them a brochure that we want to construct a college building for which we require donations, and you pass a resolution and you circulate the brochures to the visitors. Knowing the situation and knowing the need of the institution, if anybody comes and gives the donation, that also can be treated as corpus donation. But out of this corpus donation, there is no obligation to apply not less than 85%. But we have to show it as income. Voluntary contribution is also to be treated as income, but an exemption, deduction or deduction given under section 11 subsection D, 11(1)(d), that gives corpus donations are exempted. Then comes this value of services. Suppose an institution has constructed a noted medical hospital, but as per the provisions of the law under section 30 subsection 3, interested persons cannot get any benefit out of the society's activities. But a super specialty hospital is run by the trust. If the trustee gets to be treated, he has to go to another hospital. That's something difficult to digest. So therefore, the section is further amended, section 12. If any services are provided to those interested persons, either at free of cost or at concessional rate, that should be treated as income for the purpose of section 12. So now we go to Again, back to section 11. 11.1 says, not less than 85% you have to apply for charitable objectives within the year. Suppose due to reasons beyond your control, you may not have spent 85% for the objectives during the year. You have spent only 50%. Say for example, 1 crore is your gross receipts. You have spent only 40 lakhs. Normally you have to spend 85 lakhs, 85%, but your application is only 40 lakhs. There is a shortfall of 45 lakhs. This amount is liable to be taxed. But 11 subsection 2 has come to your rescue. Like section 11 subsection 2 says, if there is unspent surplus, you can accumulate for future use by giving a notice to the assessing officer in form number 10, stating the reason, stating the purpose for which it is accumulated. This is most important. You have to state the purpose for which it is accumulated. Then what we have to do, can you give this unspent amount to your friend who is doing business and who offers 36% interest? Act says no. You have to keep these funds invested as directed under subsection 5 of section 11. There is a pattern of investment given in section 11 subsection 5. You have to deposit only in those patterns, but you cannot give to outside. So this section 11 subsection 2, we have accumulated funds. This form, when it is to be filed, earlier at any time you can file before completion of the assessment, for which there is a support from Supreme Court's judgment, Nagpur Hotel Owners Association versus CIT. Now, from assessment year 2018-19 onwards, no, 15-16 onwards, the proviso is changed. Now you have to file the application online. When this application is to be filed, also provided in the law that you have to file this application within the time allowed under subsection 1 of 139. If you don't file the application within the time, you are the loser, you have to pay tax. Earlier, people were not aware of these provisions, filed manual returns, manual up. Of course, board has come to the rescue of associations and given powers to commissioners under 119 of the Act and allowing for the condonation. Now that part is over. 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18 and 18, 19 assessment years. The condonnations were given and that part is gone. Now we have to file the application well within the time of 139 subsection 1. Then only you can claim exemption under section 11 subsection 2. So therefore, be careful of finalizing the accounts of the institutions, find out the unspent amount, file the application well in time, then only we can save the institution from tax clutches. Now, once this accumulation, for how long we can? The maximum period given in the law is only 5 years. Within 5 years, you have to draw the money and utilize for the same objectives for which it is accumulated. Suppose you have accumulated the fund for construction of a hospital, but due to various reasons, you couldn't do the job. Therefore, you can request the officer, he got a power, the assessing officer has a power under section 11(3) capital A. He got a power to allow the institution to accumulate the same for a different purpose. So you have to make an application to the officer. He may give a power, he may give a chance to the institution to transfer the purpose from one objective, what you have written in the original form, to another objective. And then within that period also you have not utilized. What is the consequences? The first consequence is, if you have not utilized the fund within 5 years and cease it to be accumulated, that is, you have not kept in the deposits as it is. You have withdrawn the money and utilized it for another objective. then you lose the benefit of exemption under section 11(2). Or you drawn the money and transfer to another institution. There also you are not supposed to get any benefit. Section clearly says you cannot transfer inter-charity, inter-trust transfers are permitted, but there are restrictions provided in the law. The first restriction is out of the accumulated 11(2), you cannot transfer any money to other institution. Even if you transfer, that will not be treated as application for the charitable activities. So therefore, be careful, don't transfer any funds accumulated under 11(2) to another institution. The other restriction is you cannot transfer as per the new provision, what is coming into effect from 1/4/2021. 2021. Now, you cannot transfer the money to another institution as corpus donation. You cannot transfer the money to another institution as corpus donation. That is also not to be treated as application of income for charitable purpose. So therefore, take care. Don't give the money out of your accumulated funds of 11 subsection 2 or out of the current year's income as corpus fund to other institution. Otherwise, the inter-charity donations are permitted. Now, before going to the registration and audit part, let us touch the other portion, that is the capital gains. Section 11(1) capital A, that deals with capital gains of charitable institutions. The capital gains, once you sell the property, you have to get exemption under section 11(1)(a), this amount has to be reinvested in acquisition of another capital asset. This money is to be reinvested in acquisition of another capital asset. The difficulty we face is, suppose the institution sold on 28th of March. At the fag end of the year, it has sold the property and it has received the fund, but failed to acquire because within 2 days they couldn't. They haven't purchased another property. They haven't acquired another property. Therefore, the institution loses the benefit. For this reason, institutions represented to the Ministry of Finance, and finally the CBDT has given a circular stating, even if the money is deposited in bank, it is a term deposit. Term deposit in a bank for a period of not less than 6 months is also to be treated as acquisition of another capital asset. No need to pay any tax on it. This is a board circular given, and then how long you have to keep this money? Maximum period is 6 months. Then after 6 months, what we have to do? No provision given in the law. That means you can draw the money after 6 months and you can utilize for any of the objectives, not simply acquiring any other asset. You can utilize for any other objects. Suppose you haven't to do this, neither you have deposited in bank nor acquired any other property. It is liable to be taxed. But 11(1)(a) never says what is the amount of tax payable. But again, you have to go to chapter 4E, capital gains. There you can claim the indexation, etc. The 20% tax you have to pay on the surplus, the capital gain. And one more provision we have in section 11, subsection 1. That is most important one, subsection 6. Section 11, subsection 5 deals with the investments. Now this subsection 6 is introduced. In case of charitable organizations, the application either in the form of revenue expenditure or even capital expenditure or both are permitted. But the capital expenditure, suppose a building is constructed and you have claimed the entire building construction as application of income within that 85%. That is permitted. But the problem here is, again, you are claiming depreciation on such asset in future. The depreciation was allowed earlier. Now, the section is amended with the introduction of subsection 6. No depreciation can be claimed on assets which are claimed as application. The entire capital expenditure claimed as application. But it is very difficult to manage that particular table. You prepare a balance sheet and the annexure is the depreciation schedule. In the depreciation schedule, you write all the assets, but you have to keep a track what assets are fully applied, claimed as application of income, what are not. But if it is from assessment year 2015-16, it's okay. What happens to the earlier one? But section says any time in the past. Suppose in some 25 years or 30 years back asset acquired and it was claimed as application in total, and every year you are claiming depreciation. But the Act says now you cannot claim any depreciation right from the beginning. So that is very difficult part on us while signing the audit report. Now section 11 subsection 7, that's recently introduced for this removal of anomaly between overlapping of section 1023C, 11, etc. Once you claim exemption under section 11, you cannot claim any exemptions under section 1023C except 10(1) as well as 1023C. 10(1) is agricultural income, 1023C is educational institution. Now, no other benefits you can claim under section 10. With the introduction of the new provisions with effect coming into effect from 1/4/2001, even this anomaly is also removed. Even 1023, once your institution is recognized, though you have 12A, but you have made an application to the commissioner for approval under 1023C. From the moment it is permitted under section 1023C, exemption under section 11 will go off. You cannot claim both. Now for section 11 subsection 1, a proviso is added which is covered by our Central Council member. That is, with effect from the assessment year 18-19, the provisions of 40A3, 40A, both are brought into the statute. That is, the provisions what are, that is explanation 2, now it is changed to explanation 3. For the purpose of determining the amount of application under clause A, clause B, the provisions of subclause IA of clause A of section 40 and 3A of section 40A shall mutatis mutandis apply as they apply to computing the income of business entity. That means if no tax is deducted at source from the expenditure which are subject to deduction of TD tax, such expenditure is to be disallowed as applied not for charitable objectives. Similarly, 40A3, that is 10,000 above, not through banking channels, is to be disallowed. And one more sections, that is section 11(4) and 4A. These two are interrelated sections. Under section 11(4A, business can be done by an institution. But the condition is the trust can do business if it is incidental to the attainment of its objectives. If it is incidental, then only it can do business. If it is not so, you cannot do business. Suppose you are running a school, you cannot open a pharmacy. That business is in no way related to education. So first of all, you have to decide, and also it should be a property held under trust. The business to be a property held under trust. These two conditions are to be satisfied. Once you have this, then you can claim in the return of income And one more condition is you have to maintain separate set of books for such businesses. Separate set of books is for such businesses. Now comes this tax audit. Whether tax audit provisions are applicable? Yes, definitely. If it comes within the limits of 44AB, the trust also to get its accounts audited under 44AB and obtain report under the same section if it is doing business. And also all the provisions of section 269SS, 269T, 269ST, all the provisions are applicable to the charitable organizations. You know the 269SS acceptance of loans or deposits, 269T repayment of loans or deposits, and 269ST in between act has come. No person shall accept more than 2 lakhs in cash. So all these provisions are applicable even to charitable organizations. So therefore, you have to make a claim in the return of income that there is a business income. The assessing officer, after scrutinizing those accounts, if he determines the income greater than what you have returned, the excess amount is to be treated as business income that is liable to be taxed. And before going to again 12, registration, we touch upon the last one, that is project grants. That these are also called tagged donations. Project grants and tagged donations. That is, if any donation is given by anybody with a direction, with a specific direction that this amount is to be utilized for such and such project, then your position is only a legal obligation. It is lies on you, a legal obligation. You don't have any right to divert it. So when it is a legal obligation, it is not to be treated as income, and no application of 85% comes here into play. We have in the return of income also separately these project grants, etc. we can show separately. So these project grants are legal obligations. There are n number of judgments favorable to the assessees. Even AP tribunal also given in case of Nirmal Agricultural Society some years back on the same. And also there is some SRUDO, that is Integrated Development of Urban and Rural Society. These are in favor of the institutions. Tagged grants, you need not have to show in the return of income at all, because you maintain separate account for these tagged grants and utilize it, and also go through the agreement between the institution as well as the donor. If the agreement is silent about the interest earned on such funds, because you don't spend the money within the same day, you may keep the funds in the bank deposits. The interest you receive, whether it is also to be spent as per the directions of the donor, then you don't have any right over such interest. If the agreement is silent about this interest as well as the residuary funds, suppose 1 crore given, you have spent 98 lakhs only. The balance 2 lakhs, what is the position? Is it to be returned back to the original donor or to be retained? That everything depends on the agreement between these two parties. If there is no such agreement, you can utilize that 2 lakhs. That will be your income. And also interest is your income. Those incomes again come into the ambit of 85% application. Recently, I have a case for appeal. The appeal is also filed by an auditor, a senior auditor. The institution is getting foreign contributions for a specific purpose of educating the handicapped. The total amount received was only 84 lakhs. This 84 lakhs is less than 1 crore. He filed the return claiming 1023C3AD, less than 1 crore, and filed the return. Because the institution is not recognized under 12A, the CPC has added the entire gross receipts to tax. And the case is again selected for scrutiny, and the officer also hasn't given any relief, and he has supported the CPC's order. Now the 40 lakhs also the tax is levied, including interest, etc. Then the auditor filed an appeal. He hasn't touched this project grants concept. He has filed the appeal also stating the grounds that it is an educational institution and whose gross receipts are less than so and so, eligible for so and so, under section so and so, so and so, everything he has written. But he hasn't deviated from his original opinion. He can deviate and claim that it is a project grant. We do not have any choice, or you cannot have any right over such property, and you do not have any right over such income. You have to spend as directed by the donor. Therefore, this appeal has come to me, and now I have to fight with the commissioners. And also, some more cases have come to me, and I won the cases, are big cases. Suppose your institution is not recognized under 12A, whereas you have received so many temples, they have come to me, Sai temples, etc. They have constructed by collecting donations from various people. They construct the temples. After completion only they come to us. By the time everything is over, they have collected funds and also they have spent for construction of the Sai temple or any other temple, what else. So in such case, what to do? Do we have to pay tax on the total collections because your institution is not recognized under 12A? My suggestion is take the donations as corpus donations. Because these donations are also have come for a specific purpose of construction of either mandir or temple, whatever it is, masjid. So in such cases, once it is treated as a corpus donation, even in the absence of 12A, it is outside the definition of income. You can claim and you can win the case. I have won so many cases on the same issue. Now come to this 12 capital A, 12 capital AA, and now the capital AB. 12 capital AA is totally replaced by 12 AB, and it is going to be replaced with that from 1/4/2011. So now first come to section 12. 12 deals with the income of the institution that we have already discussed. Now we go to the section 12 capital A. There are two conditions in section 12 capital A. The first clause is you must make an application within 1 year of creation of the trust to the Commissioner of Income Tax for recognition, registration under section 12A. Yours is a belated application. Earlier, the Commissioner, if he satisfies the reason for delay, they used to grant registration right from the inception, but those powers are removed. Now they can grant registration only from the first day of the financial year in which the application is filed, or from the day when the institution is registered. Only these two, the powers only given to the Commissioner. Now you can apply for a 12A. The conditions here are that 12A, by the time your case is pending before the CIT, before the assisting officer for scrutiny. Once your application is passed through and registration is granted, the same application, the same 12A conditions are to be applied for the assessment what is pending before the assessing officer. He has to follow those when there are no modifications in the objectives. He has to follow that. The second thing is, if it is the registration is granted or in the process of granting, the officer has no right to reopen by invoking the provisions of 147. Once the application is rejected, they can again come back to 147 as well as the assessment. Now, the second part of it is 12AB, audit part. The auditors to get, the accounts are to get to be audited as defined under section 288 of that and file an audit report. Earlier, there was no time limit prescribed in that, anytime we can file. Now, a subsection is added to the same 12 capital A. It says the audit report is to be filed along with the return. Lot of confusion. return is to be filed along with the application, audit report is to be filed along with the return of income. Suppose today you have filed the return by 8 o'clock. Due to some technical reasons, you could not file your audit report that was filed the next day. The CPC raised a huge demand, not allowing exemption, and on the gross they have levied tax, not even allowing expenditure. There is a Rajkot tribunal that clearly says income is to be taxed only on the net, not on the gross. But CPC levies the tax on the gross without allowing any expenditure. So again, the board has interfered. Huge demand of paper demand. Therefore, board interfered and they issued directions to the commissioners under 119. Then we have applied in many cases for condonation of the delay, and finally the demands were reduced. Now, to avoid this and to remove this anomaly, the latest act, that is 2000 Financial Act, it has just modified that particular section. It says you can get your accounts audited within the time specified under section 44AB and obtain a report, and also file the report within the same time specified under 44AB. It is not to be filed along with the return. The return can be filed prior or even after, but you have to file the audit report well within the time provided under 44AB. Second thing is filing of the return belatedly. Once you file the return belatedly, you lose the benefit of exemption. Earlier, this provision was not there, but it has come into statute from assessment year 17-18 and onwards. One AG audit fellow interacted with me and he says, no, for the assessment year 16-17 in prior years also I can apply the same. Then he argued with me, go through section 139(4)(a). 139(4)(a) says the institutions which are charitable also to file the return of income under 139(4)(a) if their income exceeds maximum amount which is not liable to be taxed before applying section 11 within the time under 139(1). So he has given the reference to 139(1). The auditor says, the AG auditor says, because already there is a provision prior to this amendment, since we have the return is filed belatedly, I don't allow this exemption. Then I put before him, why this section has brought into statute only with effect from assessment year 17-18. The reason for referring 139(4)(a) read with 139 is only for levying interest under section 234(a), for not allowing losses if any claimed, etc., etc. Not removing, not disallowing exemptions under that particular section. That is clearly put into the statute only from the assessment year 17-18 onwards. So therefore, you have to file the return of income also well within the time. If you fail to file within the time, you lose the benefit of exemption. If the audit report is not filed well within the time, also you lose the benefit of exemption. Be careful. Handling a tax audit case is much, much easier than handling a trust case. Now these new provisions have come, that is the registration part. Many officers used to ask me, where is your 12-year copy? I used to file them a Xerox copy. They said, I know, I want the original. The original is tampered, sir, because it was given 30 years back. I cannot keep it intact. So the only Xerox copy I have, it is your obligation to maintain the originals in your file. Then there is no record available anywhere in the income tax department of earlier years, 12 years. Therefore, they brought in a new section 12 capital AB to develop the database and also to check whether institutions availing the 12-year benefit, 12-year registration, not filing any returns of income. So therefore, you have to file an application within 3 months. from 1/4/2001 because the act is coming into force from 1/4/2021. Therefore, you have to file an application within 3 months before 30th June. Make an application for renewal. For renewal, no questions will be asked to by the commissioners. Automatically, you get your institution's 12 years renewed, but that renewal you may receive within 3 months from the date of your application. Within 3 months. Now there was a problem that institution created. They apply for a 12-year. Sometimes they reject and they cannot take any activities. Therefore, to remove that problem, a provisional registration is also introduced under 12 capital AB. Once you file the application, a new institution, automatically a provisional registration be granted without raising any queries. The first thing is existing institutions file for renewal. The commissioner, without asking any queries, grants renewal. That renewal is valid for next 5 years. And within 6 months from the end, that is before 6 months from the end of the 5-year period, you have to again file for renewal. It is a regular process. And come to this provisional registration. For a provisional registration also, first you make the application, automatically a provisional registration is granted. Then what to do with this provisional? Once you start your activities within 3 years, then you have to make an application for regular registration within 6 months from your starting of activities. Or 3 years time is given. 6 months before the end of the 6 months before the 3-year period, you have to make an application for registration. Then commissioner may call for necessary documents for granting 12A. He can verify other documents, and also your obligations under different laws are also to be, he can verify. That is your obligation. Suppose you have FCRA registration, foreign contributions registration. Have you filed the returns properly? Well within time. Are there any queries? Are there any penalties, right? Those all things he will take into consideration before granting registration under 12AB. Once a registration is granted, you can again file renewal only within 5 years, 6 months before the 5th year. And the similar provisions are also given to section 1023C for renewals. Once it is approved by the commissioner, again you have to go for renewal. Existing renewals automatically they get, but fresh registrations, they get first provisional registration as well as the regular registration they have to apply. The times it is specified under section 12 capital AB. Now comes section 80Z also, the same provisions given. Section 80Z, once it was given, earlier the commissioner used to grant only for 2 years or 3 years, maximum 5 years as per the act. Now 4 years or 5 years back, they made it perpetual. Once 80Z is granted, that continues forever until and unless the commissioner, the granting authority cancels it. Again, the same situation has come. You have to apply for renewal again and again every 5 years. The same time limits given for 80Z also. But there is another obligation for 80Z. There are fake donation claims by various employees and various others. Because business people generally, they don't claim for 80Z. Only employees they claim. Bogus receipts they produce. They claim 80Z deductions. To control this, now a new provision is brought in. That is, you have to upload the PAN number as well as the data of the donor who has given the money. you cannot accept more than 2,000 in cash to give the benefit to the donor, the deduction under section 80G. There would not be any problem with the institution. It can collect any money in cash. Whereas to give the benefit to other fellow, he has to pay only through banking channels, more than 2,000. Then you have to upload it. Once it is uploaded, it will be reflected in his 26 AS. And if we don't upload, what happens? There are two penalties provisions given. In case of delay in filing such statements, a late fee of ₹200 per day shall be applicable under newly inserted section 234G. We have 234E for late filing of TDS returns. Next to that, 234G is added. There you get ₹200 penalty per every day. And also further a penalty under section 271K, which shall not be less than 10,000 and which may be extended up to 1 lakh. These two penalties we have to face if we don't upload the donations received. So these are the latest provisions of 12AB that is coming into effect from 1/4/2021. Now we go to the greener, already we have seen only the greener part, we go to the red area of the charitable organization, that is section 13. Section 13 deals with the forfeitures. If you don't follow the provisions of section 11, 12, 12A, etc., the section 13 comes to play. Any part of income from property held under trust for private religious purposes, if it is a public religious institution only, it is eligible for exemption. If it is a private religious institution, no benefit shall be allowed. And this section 13 subsection 1 is very important, that I will explain shortly. Any institution is created for the benefit of a particular religious community. Very important thing, particular religious community. We have seen so many institutions established in the name of communities. Reddy Jana Seva Samiti, Kamma Jana Seva Samiti, Brahmana Samiti. Like this, there are so many institutions created in the name of the communities. So if you start any institution in the name of communities and work for the community's benefit, you lose the benefit of exemption. But any institution created prior to 1/4/1962, still they can do the same activity. It can extend their benefits to only to the same community. But institutions created after that date cannot do any such activities. But there is again an exception given. However, this bar doesn't apply to trust established for the benefit of scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, backward community, and women and children. If any institutions created for these communities, still you can get the same benefit. Now the most dangerous section is section 13(1)(c). 13(1)(c), if any benefits given to the interested persons are defined in section 13 subsection 3. That is members of the institution, trustee, trustees, settlor, their relations, and the business entities in which these people are interested, etc. Big list given. If any benefit is passed on to them, then the tax is leviable to that extent. The benefit, what else being passed to them, to that extent, maximum marginal rate, that is 30%. And also section 13(1)(d) says, if any monies are not invested as directed under section 11 subsection 5, 11(1)(5), 11(5) only, if any monies are not invested in such fashion, then also the tax is leviable at maximum marginal rate. And Friends used to ask me a question regularly. Suppose a lawyer is trustee in an organization. He deals with a case which is against somebody has filed a case against the institution. He is the member of the institution. He he argued before the High Court and won the case. And he asked for reasonable fees to be paid. Can we pay the fees? Because he's an interested person. But Section 13, subsection 2 has given certain exceptions. Under these exceptions, if any money is paid for the services, reasonable amount. It is not defined anywhere what is reasonable. If the money is reasonably paid, that is allowed. Recently, I have qualified one audit report. Benefits are given to the member president of the institution. The properties of the institution are pledged with a bank and obtain a loan of 5 crores. The entire 5 crores transferred to the interested person, that is president, without any security, without any proper adequate interest. Therefore, I am forced to write the audit report, and based on which the case is selected for scrutiny and the assessment is completed simply on that particular point, tax is levied more than 1 crore. Now the matter is pending before the tribunal. The first appeal also, they lost. Then they may lose the case in tribunal, also in High Court. So that is a dangerous provision 13(1)(c). Be careful, take the list of related persons before you sign the balance sheet. And one more dangerous area, that is section 115 TD. 115 TD. This Finance Act 2016 has added a new section 115 TD, TE, TF, 3 sections to tax on accreted income. What is this accreted income? Accreted income is the fair market value of assets less liabilities is accreted income. On this accreted income, tax is to be levied at maximum marginal rate 30%. When this particular situation arises, once your 12A is cancelled by the commissioner, if there is a violation under section 13(1), the commissioner may cancel your registration. Once the registration is cancelled, the 115 TD comes into picture and it plays a vital role. And other situations are the organization gets converted into another entity which is not eligible under section 11. Suppose he has converted into a business entity. You are running a school, the institution running a college and claiming exemption under section 11. Now they have converted into a business entity. There also the 115 TD comes to play. And so next is your organization is merged with another institution which is not recognized under 12A. There also 115 TD. And if the organization in case of dissolution fails to transfer the assets to another society having the similar objectives, it has to transfer on dissolution, it has to transfer to another society which has the similar objectives. When the institution fails to transfer such properties, then also 115 TD comes into play. So once the 115 TD has come, recently one officer called me and he has showed me the number of cases are selected for scrutiny for this year under 115 TD. I'm surprised. The 115 TD is a dangerous provision, sir. How this has come? Then it is only the auditor's mistake. He has selected, he has filled those columns, 115 TD columns also in the return of income. Not at all necessary. The institutions are going concerns. The regular running institutions, their 12 years are not cancelled and none of these conditions are applicable. But simply auditor return the fair market value, less liabilities and show the net amount. The computer picked up those cases for scrutiny. Unnecessary work, unnecessary to the institutions. And finally, those cases are accepted by the assessing officer and remove those additions. And in case of this 12-year cancellation, within 14 days from the date of cancellation, you have to pay tax. How it is possible to pay within 14 days? When you sell the property, when you collect the money, when you pay the tax. If you don't pay within 14 days, you may have to pay interest at 12%, that is section 115TE. And also the penalties under 115TF. So these are all the provisions we have. Just to go through the return, what are the columns given, and also decide before filing the return what is to be filled. Simply don't file the return as it is, filling the columns as you feel. Once a return of income is filed, there is no remedy for you to withdraw it. Once it is filed, it is gone from your hand. And also now it is faceless unless you be thorough, and unless you be thorough in your drafting skills, you may not have to face these situations. So I briefly covered the provisions of section 11, 12, 13, 10, etc. And if you have any queries, you may raise the queries.
Sir, if anybody have questions, please unmute yourself and we can just.
One more new amendment I want to cover is section 1023C. If for 1023C, actually the corpus donations are exempted under section 11, but no provision is there, suitable provision under section 1023C. Now, this particular Finance Act has given this benefit to 1023C institutions also. Any donations received with a direction that it shall form part of corpus is out of the definition of income. And also the same provisions what the section 11-12 follows, the same section 1023C also to follow those institutions. That means they too cannot give to another institution any donation as corpus out of its current year's income. And also it cannot transfer any funds out of accumulated funds to the other institution. These cares are to be taken even for 1023C cases.
Received, sir, from NV Suresh. Sir, is there any cap on the amount of kind donations for construction received by a trust?
Pardon?
Is there any cap on the amount of kind donations for construction received by a trust? What is there in the
kind donations, any amount they can receive, kind donations, there is no cap.
Sir, Venu sir, you have any this thing, sir, specific? Venugopal Reddy sir.
Pardon? I couldn't get you.
No, I just asked one member, just if you have, they have any. Yes, questions are not. Sir, please unmute and ask, sir. I request to members, if any have questions. Please unmute and ask, sir. Dear members.
Good evening, sir. I am Kota Janardhan Rao, Prabha Branch Chairman.
Namaskaram.
I have a few doubts, sir. Namaste, sir. Sir, ఇప్పుడు ఆడిట్ రిపోర్ట్ ఫైలింగ్ 31st అక్టోబర్ చేయాలి. రిటర్న్ ఏమో 30th నవంబర్ లోపల చేయొచ్చు ఆడిట్ రిటర్న్ ఆల్ ట్రస్ట్ కేసెస్.
yes sir.
సో మనం 31st అక్టోబర్ లోపల ఆడిట్ రిపోర్ట్ ఫైల్ చేయలేకపోయాం. బట్ బిఫోర్ ఫైలింగ్ డ్యూ డేట్ ఆఫ్ రిటర్న్ ఐటీఆర్ డ్యూ డేట్ లోపల ఫైల్ చేస్తాం. వెదర్ ఎనీ ఎఫెక్ట్ ఆన్ ది అలవబిలిటీ ఆఫ్ సెక్షన్ 11 డిడక్షన్?
No, section 139(1) లో ఇచ్చింది ఏమంటే ఇప్పుడు కొత్తగా ఇచ్చిన దానిలో రిటర్న్ ఇస్ టు బి ఫైల్డ్ అండర్ ద టైమ్ లిమిట్స్ ఆఫ్ 139(1). సో స్ట్రిక్ట్లీ ఇఫ్ వి ఫాలో దోస్ the return is to be filed well within the time, and also the audit report well within the time.
కానీ ఆడిట్ రిపోర్ట్ ఏమో 31st October అంటున్నాడు. ఇక్కడ మన ప్రెషర్ చూస్తే ప్రజలు ఇంకా రావట్లేదు, పరిస్థితి దారుణంగా ఉంది.
No, you can claim, sir, in the beginning that the chief guest has told the extension of, don't worry about the extension of the date. You can give a reasonable cause why you have not filed the audit report well within time.
Okay. My second doubt is,
Cheppandi.
in which column of the ITR, I have to show this tagged grant.
Tagged grants is not the income,
Project
sir.
grants, tagged grants.
Tagged grants are not income. You can
not
exclude it
income.
totally from your return of
Not
income.
income. Where to show in the ITR?
Asal చూపించక్కర్లేదు, sir. Tagged grant is not, it is only a
Sir,
legal obligation. Tagged grant is only a legal obligation.
Sir, in some, yes, sir. In some cases, there are only tagged grants, sir. There is no other grant.
Then need not show any income.
Christian institution.
Once you have all tagged grants, no need to show it because you are not the owner of such income.
Yes, sir. We agree. But return does not contain any column, no, sir. To show that, if at all we want to show.
No, there is no way to show as capital the tagged grants in the return of income.
Okay. Next point is, for an unregistered trust, ITR 5 or ITR 7. Now the software is not accepting ITR 7 unless we select some exemption section.
Unless yours is registered and you put the number. Is a car.
Point is, in case of an unregistered trust in olden times, when ITR 7 is filed, they have not allowed the section 11 expenditure and assessed the gross income at the MMR, CPC, under 143.
Is it CPC? Is it CPC or the assessing officer?
CPC, sir, CPC. Assessment year 1569.
No, CPC, there are many mistakes. They are taxing on the gross, not on the net income. And I have attended before commissioners on several cases of the same issue, and I won the cases.
So CIT appeals.
Yes, that's the only remedy.
Sir, there is one question from Vijay Bhaskar, Kamalapuram. Sir, section 1023C clause 3AD, gross receipts less than 1 crore is not required to file for registration under new section 12AB. Also, sir, if that institute crosses 1 crore in the current year, when to apply for registration, sir?
See, once the gross receipts are less than 1 crore, no need to file any application for registration. It is a blanket exemption given in the statute. You can straight away file a return of income, but under 139(4)(c), you have to file a return of income claiming the entire gross receipts as exemption. But once your gross receipts exceeded 1 crore, there is no way except going for recognition under either 1023C or going for 12A.
One more question, sir. The audit report in November, if we file the audit report in November, is there a chance of not getting exemption, sir, for this year?
That's what Mr. Janardhan also has asked at the same time.
Okay. The other one is this is one Mr. Mohan. Sir, please explain fourth letter importance of PAN for 12AA. Can we have T as fourth letter in the PAN for an educational institution for claiming the above exemption?
No, once your institution is registered under Section 8 of the Companies Act, you get C. If it is registered as a society or a trust, then you have to get fourth character as T only. If it is A, automatically your return will not be accepted, stating that there is a status mismatch.
There is one more question from Vijay Bhaskar, sir. Government reimbursement fee received by the institute can be considered for wholly or substantially financed by government? Please clarify.
So that rule 3BBB, I told you that substantially is defined in that particular rule. Substantially means more than 50% of the receipts are from the government, then it is fit into that particular subsection of 1023C, 3AB. If it is less than 50%, it cannot come under that particular clause.
One more question from Mr. Subbarao sir again. Is there any problem if we maintain hostel for the students in the campus, sir?
Pardon? Hostel.
Yeah, maintain in the campus.
It is incident to the attainment of its objectives. When a school is running, it is also incidental to the attainment of objective. There is no prohibition. You can run hostel. You can also run buses for the use of students.
Sir, one supplement question, whether separate books of accounts have to be maintained under section 11, subsection 4A in respect of such buses and hostel. Is it necessary?
For hospitals?
No, for the education institution,
Hostels.
for running buses and hostels, whether separate books of accounts have to be maintained as per subsection 4A of section 11.
It is not a command of the
Incidental
business. It is incidental to the carrying out activities, bringing the students and taking returning them to home is not a business. If it is given for contract, then we have to deduct taxes resource. And no,
they are collecting some fees, sir. Institution is collecting some fee.
Institution is collecting a fee. Bus fees also they are collecting. And they are maintaining the same, their own buses are giving it for lease. The buses are run by the institution.
This is one more question.
Buses, it is not a business.
Okay.
There is one more question, sir.
When it is not a business, no need to show maintain separate set of books.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, do we need to furnish or fill the gross receipts in section 1023 or net income in the written of income?
Repeat it, sir.
Do we need to furnish fill the gross receipts in section 1023 or net income in the written of income?
I couldn't get it again.
Do we need to furnish the gross receipts in section 10?
We have to furnish the what receipts?
Gross receipts.
Gross receipts.
Yeah. Or net income.
No, gross receipts we have to mention, sir, gross receipts.
Okay.
The section says 2,50,000 before application of section 11. So we have to show all the receipts, including the corpus donations. Then we have to claim deduction under section 11(1)(d), the corpus donations.
Sir, he is asking about 1023C, sir. Same fact in a case of a 1023C 3AD institution.
Sales tax.
1023C 3AD institution, education institution, below 1 crore turnover,
Yes.
whether to fill gross receipts in the return or net income only. That is
Only
what-
gross receipts, sir, gross receipts.
Sir, educational institute fees are 95 lakhs and corpus donations are 6 lakhs. Can we claim exemption under section 1023C and 3AD?
95 lakhs.
Is the fees, sir, educational institution
Yes.
fees collections are 95 lakhs and the donations are 6 lakhs. Can we claim exemption under section?
No, the section says the gross receipts, not from the educational institution, gross receipts of the institution.
Okay.
That includes the donations also. If they receive the donations as corpus, we can exclude.
So this is one from Mr. Bharat Kumar, sir. One lorry union is having a property and they derive income on property, which was let out to petrol bunk, and the whole income was used for the welfare of lorry driver, union members, their PAN is trust. PAN number is trust. PAN number, they don't have any 12A exemption as of now. Can we claim Section 11 benefits or not for the financial year 1920?
They are getting the lease income from the petrol bunk,
Yeah.
the Lorry Owners Association, isn't it?
Yeah.
They are getting the rent from the Lorry Owners Association, no, the petrol bunk by the Lorry Owners Association. The monies are utilized only by the Lorry Owners Association for the benefit of its members.
Yeah.
So it is not a 12-year registered institution. It is only a mutually aided institution. Mutual aided institution has a different role to play.
Are there any questions from members? Please. Okay, one more has come from one Mr. Madhu sir. How should we change existing PAN to change its fourth letter as T instead of A for educational societies?
Now here the problem is once your PAN is with the fourth character A, that is given in the name, in the status of association of person, you cannot simply write to the NSDL or so for modification of the PAN. You have to cancel the first PAN card and you have to reapply for different status. There is no provision for modification of status.
So this is one from Mr. Sushant Kota sir. In respect of educational institutions, a payment is made for computer education charges of rupees 6 lakhs. The educational institute has not deducted any TDS and there is a contract between educational institute and computer operator. Whether the same should be qualified in 10B even though the 6 lakhs is not treated as application of income?
No, actually in Form 10B, earlier it was given for discussion, but it is not brought into the statute, that the latest Form 10B. As of now, there is no provision in the audit report 10B to write this deduction of tax at source as well as 40A3 violations, etc. Auditor has no role to play there.
An endowment temple established long back apply for 12-year registration with only 1 year of registration. Can an endowment temple established long back apply for 12-year registration with only 1 year of registration?
Yes, sir. There are a number of temples, endowment temples are even 500 years old, 1000 years old, etc. But there is a circular, I think the Endowment Act, some section 6B or so, I don't exactly remember. If they notify under that particular section, basing on that particular notification, they can claim for, they can go for 12-year registration. There is a tribunal judgment of Nellore, Kodandaramaswamy temple, I think. They won the case because they filed only forms, section 6-year registration certificate and they got 12-year registration.
Yeah, one more question, sir. A group of old students registered as society and collecting donations and spending for students' welfare in the school. This is registered society in AP. How the taxation shall be affected to this society now, sir?
Students of society, if they collect money and spend for their own purpose, there would not be any problems. So once they deposit it into the bank, automatically they get compliance notice from the income tax department. So much of money is credited in your account. And as per our records, there is no return of income filed. If they collect and spend, there is no problem.
Okay. One more from Madhu sir again. If we modify or if we applied new PAN, what about its standity in the records of the government and how about 12-year standity?
There are, I have seen one particular institution, originally they have applied for it. Nowadays, the commissioners are giving 12A followed by the PAN number also. They are encrypting PAN number also in the same 12-year registration certificate. Once a PAN with A is registered, you have to make an application first to the income tax commissioner for a modification of the PAN. Once you get permission from the commissioner, then you have to go for modification of the PAN or applying for a new PAN. Then again, you have to approach the commissioner to modify 12A.
Sir, any more questions, please? Members? So you can unmute yourself and sir, that's Mr. Janardhan Rao garu, please go ahead, sir.
సార్ ఒక యూనివర్సిటీ వాళ్ళు ఓన్లీ రిసీట్స్ అండ్ పేమెంట్స్ అకౌంటే వేస్తున్నారు. దే ఆర్ నాట్ ప్రిపేరింగ్ బ్యాలెన్స్ షీట్. నౌ వీ వాంట్ అప్లై ఫర్ ఏటీజీ అంటే మరి ఏటీజీ అప్లికేషన్ లో వాడు అడుగుతాడు రిసీట్స్ అండ్ పేమెంట్స్ ఇన్కమ్ అండ్ ఎక్స్పెన్సెస్ బ్యాలెన్స్ షీట్ పెట్టు అని. అప్పుడు ఎలా చేయాలి? బ్యాలెన్స్ షీట్ వేయట్లేదు. లోకల్ ఫండ్ ఆడిట్ వాళ్ళు ఆడిట్ చేస్తారు, వాళ్ళు కూడా వేయలేదు.
అసెట్స్ యొక్క టెంటేటివ్ వాల్యూ వేసి మనం బ్యాలెన్స్ షీట్ చేయొచ్చు కదా, సర్టిఫైడ్ బై ది వైస్ ఛాన్సలర్ ఆఫ్ ది ఇన్స్టిట్యూషన్. చేసి సబ్మిట్ చేయొచ్చండి.
Sir, Venugopal Reddy, sir.
Can be only approximate.
Approximate only. We call it a statement of affairs.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Sir, universities are not filing their income tax returns from financial year 15-16 onwards as per section 139(4)(a). Now, if they want to apply for 12A, and that is 12AB, and a new provision, then how can we apply for it without filing the income tax returns?
I have given an opinion. I told in during my speech, I have given an opinion for technological university in Andhra Pradesh. They are not filing returns at all because they say the total funds what else we get from the government only. But on verification, the government grant is only 10% of the total fees.
They are those government funds are less than 50%.
Yes,
Total grants what they are receiving it is less than 50%.
Yes, less than 50% they are getting, and they are not filing the returns at all.
Yes, exactly.
Now the department has given notices, even for prosecution notice given on served on the registrar. They have to file the returns of income. For early years, we cannot file unless a 147 is invoked. Only a statement you can file before the commissioner. If they insist for filing of the return, ask them to issue a notice under 147 and then file a return of income. But the other problem is once 147...
Till such time we cannot apply for 12A.
Pardon?
We cannot apply till such time 12A, no sir?
No,
See, without
apply.
filing income tax returns, we cannot apply for 12A.
Once it is recognized under 1023C, as per the new act, you cannot go for 12A. As per the new act, that is coming into effect from 1/4.
If it is more than 1 crore, I can either go for 12A or for 1023C. Both I can't have it. No, sir.
No, there are breaks in your voice.
Sir, as per new provision, if anyone can have only one, either 12A or 1023C. Here they used to have both. Now it has been barred. Now they must have only 12A or 1023C. Suppose for universities, I go for 12A now. What is the status?
No, actually, universities are not fit into 12A. Only universities have separate because they do not have any other income other than education. So better go for 1023C only. And suppose in future, if the government grants are more than 50%, still you can claim under section 23C 3AB.
That is true. But then they
once you are in 12A, you cannot claim any benefits under 1023C.
They have other income like, rental income. They have given rent for banks, their premises, and they have given some towers, cell phone towers. They are getting some rent there. And, other income there, conducting some examinations not the students, they relate to the government examinations. So are they not?
Sorry, your voice is not clear, sir.
సార్ కొంచెం ఇంటర్నెట్ కనెక్షన్ అయితే ప్రాబ్లం ఉన్నట్టు సార్. ఈజీ సార్, కొంచెం వాయిస్ సరిగ్గా రావట్లా మీది.
సార్ హలో
sir, one last question is there, sir, from Mr. Raghavendra Gowda. Remuneration to director of education institution is a reasonable payment. So, 1 minute, Mr. Narayan.
Pardon, repeat.
Sir, remuneration to directors of educational institution, is it a reasonable payment? So,
No, actually, director of the university is not a member of the institution. The restrictions are only to the members of the institution. He is only an employee. He can draw salary.
sir,
One
Nagaraj,
submission, sir.
Yeah.
One submission, sir.
Sir.
Sir, this
Sir,
Harish Chandra, one
any-
submission, sir.
yeah.
Regarding your opinion about 1023C for universities, I concur with you, sir. Instead of going for 12A, better to go for 1023C. Normally, the gross receipts will be more than 1 crore. Better to go for 1023C.
No, sir, your institution is existing solely for educational purposes. It is
Exactly.
better to go for 1023C. Because
Very
the
good.
same authority grants both 12A as well as 1023C.
Yes.
Of course,
I concur with you,
almost
sir.
all provisions are similar. Almost all
Yes.
provisions are similar. What provisions and what restrictions you have in section 1112, the same are provided in section 1023C with the number of provisions. There it is given subsections, but here it is total provisions. The only advantage is in case of 1023C, 115 TD is applicable only to 12A institutions, but not 1023C institutions.
I concur with you, sir.
And also the other one is, if you do not go for renewal, the act says your exemptions under section 1112 will be forfeited. But nowhere it is said that your 12A is cancelled. 115 TD comes into picture only once the 12A is cancelled. I think there is some mistake in drafting. They may correct it.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, Mr. Nagaraj, sir, any question from you, sir? Please, please.
Yeah, one small question.
Yes, sir.
Respected speaker, see, there is one society which is registered and is running an educational institution.
Yes.
And the gross receipts of the education institution are 70 lakhs. And it has an attached hostel. And and the gross receipts of the hostel are around 50 lakhs. So the total gross receipts are 1.2.
Yes, sir.
And we are maintaining 2 set of books of accounts, for one for education institution and another for the hostel.
Okay.
And we are admitting and we are claiming the exemption under section 1023C 3AD
Okay.
as the gross receipts of the education institution are less than 1 crore. And we are admitting the income from the hostel as taxable, and we are paying the tax. Is there any variation or is there any better suggestion, sir?
No, actually, you cannot file two different incomes. One is claiming exemption under 1023C 3AD and other is for business entity. Now, here it is where 1 crore limit is to be seen separately. In case of Jat Educational Society versus Deputy CIT, in Delhi Tribunal's judgment, it was said that 1 crore limit was to be seen separately. In other words, if the trust has running 5 educational institutions, and then each institution will enjoy the 1 crore limit. But unfortunately, in the return of income, there is no provision to write separately for each and every institution. Once you enter the figure, including hostel, it automatically goes to more than 1 crore, automatically the entire exemption will be forfeited. So better go for 1023C registration immediately. Whether today or tomorrow you may have to face these problems.
So admitting the income, only one return is filed. And education institution is entire income is claimed as
suppose your case is selected for scrutiny. Suppose your case is selected for scrutiny. Yes. The assessing officer says your gross receipts are exceeding 1 crore. I don't allow exemption to this educational institution. They treat this also as a business entity and pay the heavy tax. There is every possibility.
But in the previous years, so scrutinies have been completed allowing the exemption, sir.
No, that is okay. Olden days, it's all over. But now it is going to be a team-based assessments. It goes from one hand to other hand. There are technical teams. There are review teams. At least now we have to change.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Ramakrishna, you have anything, Mr. Ramakrishna?
No, sir.
Okay.
No.
Sir, anybody else? So if any other session, anybody is there, otherwise we will just conclude the session, sir. Thank you, Speaker, sir. Now it is the time for conveying vote of thanks, sir. I just may call upon Mr. Meda Nagaraju, Secretary of Anantapur branch, to convey vote of thanks, sir. Mr. Nagaraju, please come on to.
Yeah. Firstly, I would thank the chairman of all the 3 branches who are jointly conducting this webinar and who have given me an opportunity to say a vote of thanks on this occasion, and I feel it as a pride of honor, sir. And this is one of the best subjects selected for the day, and many doubts have been really resolved by the speaker, sir. And our sincere thanks to the SIRC members and executive members of the branches, Mr. Naresh Chandra Gelli and Mr. Chengal Reddy Garu, who have participated in this webinar, sir. And our special thanks also to the speaker's introduction by Mr. Shanmukesh, who has really introduced the guest of honor for the day, sir. And Mr. Ratnagupta, and our thanks to Ratnagupta, who has introduced the speaker, sir. And our special thanks to the guest of honor, Mr. Shekhar, who has really enlightened and who has made this session, an introductory session, as very interesting one, sir. And with regard to the speech by Mr. Subbarao Garu, we are really enriched by your speech, and we really have enriched ourselves with your suggestions, and we really take the suggestions to our practice and see that we are really a good practitioners, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you one and all, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Nagaraj. Thank you, Subbarao Garu. Thanks ante baga aindi andarni baga highlight chesaru ivalla. Shekhar sir kuda we have to convey, sir, because sir, I just my request to the committee, management committees of all the 3 branches, that we can have a session from